Mia, can I ask you something?
Of course.
Why do some people become fluent in English so much faster than others? I know people who studied for years, but still feel nervous every time they speak. And then there are people who seem to improve every single month. How is that possible?
That's a great question, and I don't think the answer is they're smarter.
I don't think so either. In fact, I used to believe that fluency came from studying more. More grammar, more vocabulary, more textbooks. So that's exactly what I did. I spent hours studying. But when someone asked me a simple question in English, I still froze.
I think many people know that feeling. You learn a lot, but speaking still feels difficult.
Exactly. That's when I realized something. Fluent English isn't only about what you study. It's also about what you do every day. Your daily habits.
I completely agree. Small habits may not seem exciting, but they quietly change the way your brain learns a language.
So today, we're going to share 5 simple English habits that can make a huge difference over time. They're not difficult. You don't need expensive courses. You don't need to study for 5 hours a day. Most of them take only a few minutes.
And the best part is, you can start every single one today, right after this episode.
Let's begin with the first habit. It's simple. Almost everyone knows it. But surprisingly, very few people do it consistently.
Habit number 1. Listen to English every single day.
Every day? Really? Even if it's only 10 minutes?
Especially if it's only 10 minutes. Because 10 minutes every day is much more powerful than 2 hours once a week.
That sounds almost too simple. Why does it make such a big difference?
Imagine moving to another country. During the first few days, everything sounds fast, confusing, almost impossible to understand. But after hearing the language every day, something begins to change. Your ears start recognizing familiar sounds, common expressions, natural rhythm. Little by little, English stops sounding like noise and starts sounding like a real conversation.
So, listening isn't just about understanding. It's training your brain to feel comfortable with English.
Exactly. And that's why listening is the first habit, because everything else becomes easier after that. Speaking, vocabulary, pronunciation, confidence, they all begin with listening.
So, if someone only remembers one thing from the first few minutes of today's episode, it should be this. Don't wait until you have an hour. Start with 10 minutes today, because one small habit can become the beginning of something much bigger. I used to think listening didn't really count as studying. If I wasn't writing notes, memorizing vocabulary, or doing grammar exercises, I felt like I wasn't making progress.
I think a lot of learners feel that way. Listening almost seems too easy.
Exactly. I'd spend 2 hours studying grammar on Saturday, and then do almost nothing for the rest of the week. I thought, that's enough. But it wasn't.
So, what changed?
1 month, I made a very small decision. Instead of studying for hours once a week, I listened to English every single morning. Sometimes it was a podcast, sometimes a YouTube video, sometimes just 10 minutes while making breakfast.
Only 10 minutes?
Yes, that was the surprising part. I wasn't studying more, I was just listening more often. After a few weeks, something strange happened. English didn't feel as fast anymore. I started recognizing expressions I'd heard before. Instead of hearing lots of separate words, I started hearing whole sentences.
That's exactly how our brains learn. The more often you hear something, the more familiar it becomes. At first, your brain has to work very hard. But after enough repetition, it begins to recognize patterns automatically.
I noticed something else. When I finally spoke English, I didn't spend as much time translating. The sentences came a little faster. Not perfectly, but more naturally.
Because your ears were already used to English. Speaking becomes much easier when listening comes first. It's a little like learning a song. The first time you hear it, you remember almost nothing. After hearing it every day, you suddenly find yourself singing the chorus without even trying.
I love that comparison. No one sits down and says, "Today I'm going to memorize this song." It just happens because you've heard it so many times.
English works in a very similar way. The goal isn't to understand every single word. The goal is to spend time with the language every day. Little by little, your ears become more comfortable. Then your brain becomes more confident. And finally, your speaking starts to change too.
So here's a simple question for everyone listening. What could you listen to tomorrow? Maybe a podcast while you're walking. Maybe an English video while you're eating breakfast. Maybe music on your way to work. It doesn't matter what you choose. The important thing is that you do it again the next day.
Exactly. Don't wait until you have an hour. 10 consistent minutes are enough to build the habit. And once that habit becomes part of your day, learning English starts feeling much more natural.
I think that's a perfect place to move on, because after you've spent time listening every day, there's one habit that makes all those new words actually come alive. Now comes the habit that scares a lot of people, speaking.
Let me guess. People are thinking, but I don't have anyone to practice with.
Exactly. That used to be my excuse. I'd tell myself, I'll start speaking when I find a conversation partner, or when I travel, or when I feel more confident.
And somehow, that perfect moment never arrived.
Never. One day, I realized something. I was waiting to become a good speaker without actually speaking.
That sounds impossible when you say it like that.
It really does. So I tried something that felt a little strange. I started talking to myself.
And how did that go?
At first, very awkward. I'd walk into the kitchen and say, "I'm making coffee. This cup is too hot. I think I need more milk." Then I'd think, what am I doing?
I think everyone feels that way in the beginning. But here's the interesting part. Your brain doesn't really care whether you're talking to another person or practicing by yourself. What matters is that you're actually producing English.
Exactly. I wasn't having amazing conversations. I was simply getting used to opening my mouth and speaking English. And after a week, it didn't feel so strange anymore.
That's because speaking is a skill. The more often you use it, the more natural it becomes. It's a little like learning to play the piano. You don't become better by watching someone else play. Eventually, your own fingers have to touch the keys.
I like that comparison. Listening is important, but at some point, your own voice has to join the conversation.
And don't worry about saying interesting things. Simple sentences are enough. I'm cooking dinner. It's raining today. I'm looking for my keys. They're ordinary, but they're real.
One habit helped me even more. Sometimes I'd record myself on my phone, not to post online, just to listen.
Were you nervous?
Very. The first time I heard my own voice, I wanted to delete the recording immediately.
Almost everyone feels that way.
But after listening a few times, I noticed something surprising. I wasn't thinking my English is terrible. I was thinking, oh, I say that word a little too quickly, or I can pronounce this sentence more clearly. Instead of judging myself, I started improving myself.
That's such an important difference. Don't record yourself to find everything that's wrong. Record yourself to notice what can become a little better.
Exactly. So here's a small challenge. Tomorrow, say 5 sentences out loud in English. Nobody has to hear them. Nobody has to correct them. Just let your voice become part of your learning.
Because the more comfortable you become with your own English, the more confident you'll feel when a real conversation finally comes.
And once you're speaking more often, there's another habit that makes every new word much easier to remember. For years, this is how I learned vocabulary. I studied a new word and a meaning, then the next word and the next meaning, word after word.
That sounds very familiar. I think millions of English learners study like that.
So did I. And the strange thing was, I recognized lots of words when I was reading. But when it was time to speak, those same words disappeared.
Because knowing a word and knowing how to use it are two completely different things.
Exactly. One day I learned the word decision. Great. But then someone asked, can you use it in a sentence? I suddenly realized I wasn't sure. Do we say do a decision, have a decision, make a decision?
That's why learning whole phrases is so powerful. Instead of memorizing one word, learn the words that naturally go together. For example, make a decision, not just decision.
I started doing that with almost everything. Not mistake, but make a mistake. Not friends, but make friends. Not progress, but make progress. Suddenly, the vocabulary felt much more useful.
Because that's how language works. Native speakers don't build every sentence one word at a time. They remember groups of words they've heard hundreds of times.
And something interesting happened. When I learned phrases instead of single words, I spent much less time thinking while I was speaking. The whole expression appeared together, almost automatically.
Think about your own language. When someone says, "Good morning," you don't stop and think about each individual word. You recognize the whole phrase instantly. That's exactly what we're trying to build in English.
Another thing that helped me was writing my own example sentence, not one from a dictionary, one about my own life. For example, instead of simply writing make progress, I'd write, I want to make progress with my English this year.
I love that idea because now the phrase has a personal connection, and personal memories are usually easier to remember.
So here's a little experiment. The next time you learn a new word, don't stop there. Ask yourself, what words usually go with it? Then write one sentence about your own life. It only takes a minute, but it makes a huge difference.
And after you've written it, say the whole sentence out loud. Now you're combining 3 habits we've already talked about. You're learning a phrase, you're speaking, and if you've been listening every day, there's a good chance you've already heard that phrase before.
It's amazing how all these habits support each other. None of them works completely alone. Each one makes the others a little stronger.
Exactly. And our next habit might be the one that changes the way you think about English forever. Because it doesn't start with speaking. It starts much earlier, inside your own mind.
Can I tell you the habit that completely changed the way I speak English?
Let me guess. Thinking in English?
Exactly. For years, every conversation in my head looked like this. First, I thought of a sentence in my own language. Then I translated it into English. Then I checked the grammar. Then I changed a few words. By the time I was ready to speak, the conversation had already moved on.
I think every English learner has experienced that. It's like trying to catch a train that's already leaving the station.
Exactly. I thought the problem was my vocabulary, but it wasn't. The problem was that I was translating every single thought.
So, how did you change that?
Very slowly. I didn't try to think in English all day. That would have been impossible. I started with very ordinary moments. When I woke up, I'd think, I'm still tired. When I looked outside, it's going to rain today. When I made coffee, this smells really good. Just simple thoughts, nothing complicated.
That's the secret. People often think they need interesting ideas. You don't. Your everyday life gives you hundreds of opportunities to practice. You're cooking, you're driving, you're walking the dog, you're waiting in line. Those moments are perfect.
And something funny happened. At first, I had to remind myself, think in English. Then, after a few weeks, it started happening on its own. Sometimes I'd notice I've been thinking in English for several minutes without even realizing it.
That's a wonderful feeling because it means English is slowly becoming part of your daily life instead of something that only exists inside a textbook.
I also stopped worrying about using difficult words. If I didn't know one word, I simply described it. Instead of stopping, I kept thinking.
That's such an important habit. Real communication isn't about knowing every word. It's about using the words you already know. Simple English is still English.
Exactly. I think many learners wait until they have a bigger vocabulary before they start thinking in English. But I actually think it works the other way around. The more you think in English, the faster your vocabulary grows.
I agree, because you're using the language every day, not only during study time. You're giving your brain hundreds of extra chances to practice.
So here's something you can try tomorrow. Choose 3 ordinary moments. Maybe breakfast, a short walk, brushing your teeth before bed. During those moments, don't translate. Just notice what's happening around you and describe it in simple English.
You don't need perfect sentences. You don't need perfect grammar. Just keep your thoughts moving. Little by little, thinking in English starts feeling surprisingly natural.
And once that happens, there's only one habit left. The habit that quietly connects everything we've talked about today. So, we've talked about listening every day, speaking out loud, learning phrases instead of single words, and thinking in English. If you could only choose one habit to keep, which one would it be?
Honestly, none of them.
That's not the answer I expected.
Because I don't think one habit changes everything. I think consistency does. That's the real habit.
I completely agree. When people ask, what's the fastest way to become fluent? I always think they're asking the wrong question. A better question is, what's the easiest way to keep learning for a whole year?
Exactly. Because learning English isn't a race. It's something you build, day after day, week after week, month after month.
I used to study in a very strange way. I'd feel incredibly motivated on Saturday. I'd study for 3 hours, learn 20 new words, watch grammar videos, do exercises. Then, I'd do almost nothing for the next 6 days.
I think a lot of people have done that. It feels productive because you're spending a lot of time. But then, a week later, it feels like you're starting again.
That's exactly how it felt. Then I changed one thing. Instead of asking, how much can I study today? I started asking, what can I do every single day? Sometimes the answer was only 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes happened again and again and again.
And that's where real progress begins. Not with one perfect study session, but with lots of ordinary ones. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't brush them for 3 hours every Sunday. You spend a few minutes every day. It doesn't feel dramatic, but over time, it makes a huge difference.
Learning English is very similar. Most fluent speakers didn't wake up one morning speaking perfectly. They simply spent time with the language, again and again, until it became part of their daily lives.
And that's the beautiful thing about habits. You don't have to think about them forever. At first, they require effort. Later, they become automatic. One day, you realize you've already listened to your English podcast. You've already thought in English while making breakfast. You've already spoken a few sentences out loud. Not because someone reminded you, but because it's simply what you do.
So, before we finish, let's come back to the 5 habits we talked about today. Listen every day. Speak out loud. Learn phrases instead of single words. Think in English. And most importantly, stay consistent.
Don't try to become a perfect English speaker this week. Just become someone who practices a little every day, because those small moments have a way of changing much bigger things.
Here's our challenge for you. Choose just one habit. Not all 5, just one. Practice it every day for the next week. Then come back and add another one. Small steps are much easier to keep, and small steps have a funny way of turning into big results.
Tell us in the comments, which habit are you going to start first? We'd really love to know. And maybe your answer will inspire another English learner too.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more relaxed English conversations, and share it with someone who's learning English.
Thank you for spending this time with us. Keep learning, keep practicing, and remember, fluency isn't built in one extraordinary day. It's built in hundreds of ordinary ones.
We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Bye, and stay cozy.